I'm still of the belief, and maybe I'm naive, that we know ourselves the best. How am I really feeling? What's going on with me? And I think that if we lose that or we farm that out to a device, we lose one of our greatest gifts, which is our instincts and our ability to check inside. Water is objective, but it tells you everything about what's going on inside of you. The water doesn't have anything against me. You have money, you're pretty, it doesn't care.
Yeah.
So all it is neutral feedback.
Well, really, there's no introduction needed.
Well, there is. When you've been around this long, you've been relevant and irrelevant already.
Okay.
You're in the cycle. It's interesting.
Well, I noticed you didn't put your sort of athletic background on your website,
Okay.
so I thought maybe you've moved on to something else. And
No.
But that's how a lot of us knew of you.
Yeah.
Was from
Professional sports.
That's correct.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think it's-
volleyball.
Yeah, professional beach volleyball first.
Yeah.
And then that sort of, that training and all of that led into an organic movement into being really interested in wellness. I won't even call it fitness. And I always say that when you're an athlete, you've been injured. And when you can't go from point A to B, you recognize very quickly that your health is important.
Right.
And so I learned that in my 20s, that I was like, oh, wait a second, I don't need to be sick or injured to understand that I should probably take care of my well-being.
One of the things that interests me, and this is a little bit of a side thing, but I also get the feeling that I know you're a strong woman, but I also get the feeling that that's also part of what you've dealt with through your career without knowing too much. So what does it mean? What does it mean for women in business and in the health and fitness business at the moment? And I'm a selfish question asking this for my daughter, really.
Yeah. When you say that, do you mean your personality or your physical strength? Because sometimes I feel like a detachment. We perceive this as strong versus this and this as strong.
Yeah.
And so what really has always been interesting for me, especially as an athlete, because you can see the most physically talented people where if this and this isn't connected and dialed in, it's not for naught. And I think that's true to life. You can have the smartest people, but if they're EQ, they can't navigate. So for me, I think it was about executing on all fronts or levers that were available to me and to try to make all of those tuned up and fit, if you will. And maybe not to take the most obvious route. I think sometimes with women, it's like, oh, this is fit and that's fit. It's like, well, what does that really mean? And how does that translate also to your everyday life?
And when you came up, and maybe we can have some podcasts, but remember in beach volleyball, you were part of that earlier. I mean, when you were in it, it's not as big as it is today, right? But you were part of that growth, right? Like, I mean, you were part of the U.S. team. I mean, all of that, I think, led to your profile, and you were part of that movement and kind of helped. But when you came into it, this whole area around women's health, strength, that, like, you didn't have that, right? I mean,
Right.
you had to pave that pathway forward.
And I'll push it on a little bit and say that there was probably a group right before us that really cleared the path. Like if you're talking about Martina Navratilova,
that's right.
and some people that really sort of brought it to the forefront. And then my group came in, and like when I signed with Nike, they had sort of 6 SKUs for apparel for women. And so I think what it was is my generation was the reflection that the market was ready for that. And we were in the right place at the right time, myself and like Cheryl Swoops and Mia Hamm, and had that real opportunity. And what people don't realize is in some ways you have NIL, which is really great for college athletes. But as a professional, I would say that we had the opportunity in certain ways, unless you're, 1 or 2 athletes, to make more money out of our sport than they even have now, because it's more competitive. So I think it's great timing, and it was a reflection that, for example, I was born when Title IX was created.
Right.
So exactly 17 years from Title IX, I went to college on an athletic scholarship. So that cake had baked, and now the market was ready.
That's incredible. And kind of looking at even, data that's available. One of the things that we talk about here, we've talked about before, is looking at wearable data, looking at strength data. So much of the research, it's better now, but when you were an athlete, was done on men. And then they
Yeah.
would extrapolate that to women and say,
Sure.
okay, a woman will do 25% or 50% less. What was it like to kind of be a pro athlete in that era?
Well, first of all, it was great because it was a discovery.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel that data and all of that, it can be a tool, but also it can also be almost like a distraction. And so, to your point earlier, they weren't even doing studies on women until 1993.
That's right.
And I was 23 in 1993. So I think that you had different kinds of body shapes and different injuries. You hear about soccer players and basketball players specifically with their knees and because of the shape of their hips and things like that. So, for example, Dr. Stacy Sims is a great resource where it's like, okay, women are not small men.
Right.
But there was something really interesting about not knowing and just kind of going for it. But sitting here today, I have an artificial knee. Maybe I would have avoided that if I had these tools that you're talking about and trained differently. So I think it's always a combination because I do find that we like to lean on technology. And at some point, especially when we're talking about professional sports or sports in general or creating businesses, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And working smart to not hurt yourself is a great idea, but you're not going to really get around the work.
That's right.
We did an event last year, and this sort of women's health came up quite a lot, and it seemed at that time anyway, it seemed to become. It seemed as though it's becoming a thing that was getting a lot more support, a lot more investment, being taken a lot more seriously. Like, where would you say I'll use the word fitness industry as a broad term, but where do you think it is in terms of addressing the needs of both men and women?
You and I were talking earlier about Kelly Starrett, and one thing I've learned, and even from Paul Chek 20-something years ago, is on some level, movement is movement. Mechanics are mechanics. There's only so many primal patterns that there are, right? It's push, pull, lunge, run, walk, all these things. So I think it's starting with a basic for both, because these are really foundational for all of us. Getting outside in the sunlight, eating well, moving, getting to bed, having good relationships. And then beyond that, saying, okay, we're getting specialized. What does that look like? She's on her cycle. Okay, she should train differently. She's going through puberty. That looks different. So I think in there it can be facilitated. But for me personally, as somebody who trains very hard and has trained hard for a really long time, I actually don't want to be spoken to so differently than a man. I want to be honored in the way that, like, hey, you're busy, life's busy, you're trying to get it done. What does that look like? So I think it's just the combination and the nuances. And then as you start to get real specific, like I do have a young daughter who's playing a sport and now she's going through puberty versus my son. How should she train? Okay, skills, not strength yet. Okay, she's a little older. Now let's add strength. Things like that. So I think tonally, it should be in certain ways similar. Now, you're going to have certain women that go, hey, I need a safe space to train.
Well, I was going to ask that. Do you think that's you, or do you think
No,
that?
that
Okay.
is not me.
Okay.
I want to be in the masculine energy when I train. I want to get it done. And I'm always going to honor that I'm a female. That's never been an issue. Because also I was around a bunch of female athletes. So we all were given permission to do that. So it's like feeding off that masculine energy. And I don't mean just from males. I mean from within myself. Firing up that part of my personality that, by the way, later I've taken into my life, my work, and I allow it to show up when it's appropriate because it's helpful. It's a helpful tool. But having said that, I've trained with a lot of women, and I have trained a lot of women that they want that safe space. Maybe they weren't taught to be playful and rough when they were young, and they're just discovering their athlete. So maybe we put them in a place that they can thrive. But I think in general, it's sort of more similar than we think.
In the last 10 years especially, and I agree with you on the technology side, because it could be overwhelming, it could be obsessive when you get into it too much. But there's been more awareness, both from men and women, around the things that you talked about, understanding the different stages of life. And I think, when we talk about this, it's just the stages of life and men have the same too, by the way, right? So you don't want to.
Except andropause is at 70, not starting in their 40s.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. But the stages of life in men tend to come a little bit later. To your point, a little bit early and a little bit later. and there's so much more complexity. Do you think the awareness has helped for just training, for just talking, and kind of all the things around that?
I do think it's helped. I think it's helped in early training, even though I think now the problem is that athletes only do one sport too early, so the repetitive trauma is pretty rigorous on their bodies. So in that way, it's weird, right? Like we're getting so high performance that we're also hurting ourselves, instead of like when I grew up, you played all the sports, you went from season to season to season, and then you went, okay, my junior, senior year, I'm gonna hone in on this sport, something like that. So I think in one way, in development, in performance, around our hormonal cycles, around menopause, it certainly is a great tool. The only other thing I see that's interesting is people lean on all that they know versus also, I'm still of the belief, and maybe I'm naive, that we know ourselves the best. How am I really feeling? What's going on with me? And I think that if we lose that, or we farm that out to a device, we lose one of our greatest gifts, which is our instincts and our ability to check inside. So I always say, like, hey, if it's a tool and you gamify it and it keeps you motivated, great. If you're using it in lieu of what you feel inside, then I think that is a real problem, because we use that in so many ways in our life, as parents, as partners, as business people. When we're crossing a street, it's like that instinct. You want to keep that dialing up as you go through life, not dialing it down and going, well, you know, it says I'm tired today. Are you?
Right.
So
right.
it's this weird,
I know.
and going back to the biology, we're always geared to do the least.
That's right.
It's natural.
Because you want to go towards what you're comfortable with, which is why
natural.
Netflix has the easiest job in the world. You know,
Right.
I remember in technology, fitness companies would say, well, let's see what Netflix does. I said, what we do is harder because we're making the body do something it naturally does not want to do.
Right.
We want to sit down, we want to eat the popcorn and just, you know, zone out and zombie out. But that's so interesting, because I have to go back and look at, you know, my text, but I got invited to your house a couple of years ago. I couldn't make it. I think partly
You were scared?
I was scared.
I'm joking.
No, it's actually true, because the session was
Pool training.
and in the ocean.
Oh.
And with I think with like
stand-up
stones.
paddle?
Yes, but also underwater.
That was my house pool training.
That was house pool training.
Yeah.
Okay. So I said, you know, I don't know if I can. And then I was talking to a person who was, it might have been Joe DeSena from Spartan. I'm not sure. Could have been Joe.
Love him.
And Joe also is very similar on wearables, like to what you just said.
Yeah.
He's more about like feeling it. And Joe and I go back many, many years.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, can you tell me more about this training? And he said, well, first of all, Laird does not really believe in technology that much, right, in terms of measuring himself. So I was like, well, then how does he progress? How does he?
Well, this is an interesting thing you're saying, because what does that mean?
Yeah.
Progress to where and to what?
Right.
So Laird, you're talking about a highly disciplined person who his love for what he does is so deep that he'll work harder than any person I know. And also he's of the belief, like, you don't bonk when you're out in the surf. He's like, bonking is a man-made thing. You don't bonk.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about a very different type of athlete who grew up in this very incredibly natural environment that's pretty savage and dangerous, and the cost of failing is high.
With big waves.
Correct,
Right,
with
yeah.
big wave surfing. So you're also talking about a highly intuitive, kind of primal person. And I've been with Laird for 29 years, so maybe that's influenced me a lot. But what I see is, how do we use also our training, because most people are not doing sports, to make us more attuned so the organism works better in life, not in the gym.
That's right.
We're in the gym for an hour, but we're here doing this all day long. And the problem I sometimes see also with technology is we've surrendered to it. Again, it's easy. You turn it off on, you go swipe, swipe. It's easy. People don't pay attention. Like, they cross the street and I'm like, you're not looking where you're going. You know, maybe you're sitting at dinner with your partner and they're like this and you're just kind of, da. So my whole thing is where is it a tool and where have we made it an excuse?
Are your members frustrated by long lines for squat racks? Equipment like squat racks are in high demand. There's a new solution that will allow your clients to train all the major muscle groups, reduce wait time, and improve your overall gym's efficiency. Curious to know more? Then contact us today.
How has your philosophy on wellness and training kind of evolved and ultimately led to some of the things which you're doing now?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, when you're doing a sport, it's very specific because it's like, I need to jump higher. I only have so much time, all that. So it was geared towards that. Then it opens up to, well, wait, there's some other things that I probably should incorporate for balance of my training so that I don't get injured. And then it even goes wider to that, to how much distance can I create from stimulus to response? Because you can move a lot of weight and do all that, and you don't have any self-mastery. Something happens and you flip out. So then it becomes a bigger conversation, a philosophical conversation around stuff is happening around me that's stressing me out or that I don't like or that I want to get into it with somebody, and I somehow have the tools to take a beat, decide how I want to be, and most times do that. And then to me, that becomes real performance. Because I don't care if you can rack it and push how much, but if you are not handling life and managing yourself and evolving in that way, then for me, the training it's hollow because it's not really doing the job. And so people a lot of times will be like, well, I'm fit. It's like, yeah, and you're a head case and whatever the myriad of things is. So I think for me, performance has really changed philosophically, and then I'm going back around to a simple idea of the human organism being as attuned and intuitive, even so that you eat the right thing. Because if you listen, your body goes, I don't know why, but I want that. And really getting back into that. And yeah, sure, use technology for, again, a tool that can be helpful, or these specific scenarios, athletes specifically, but leaning on it as a substitution, I think in the end is a problem.
Yeah.
Are you with your the programs that you deliver? How much do you go into that? Because I guess when you're talking about Laird's connection to the environment himself, I can see that that's a skill that takes a lot to develop, particularly as I get older. Like as you say, like reacting to situations. You can burn yourself out in the gym or in your company, but then when you get back, you're carrying this sort of load and maybe not as in touch. You're all sort of jacked up and aggressive when that's probably not the right thing to do,
right,
even with your children, which we're talking about. So is that something you do in your program? And if so, like, what are some of the things that you focus on to be able to get us in touch with everything that's going on around us all the time?
Now, I know this is very specific, and it's not everyone's going to have access, but that's what's been interesting about developing the pool training over the last 17 years, because the water is objective, but it tells you everything about what's going on inside of you. So if we do a drill, the three of us, and I say, okay, we're going to go there and back, no breath with a dumbbell, right? Task completion. So weirdly, right before you work, you have to downregulate. You're not going to get after it. Your eyes aren't going to get big. You're going to go the other way. It's counterintuitive. So how many things in our life, I'm going to deal with my partner, I have a kid. It's weirdly, I'm not going to take care of it. It's like I have to go into this place of downregulation. So for example, if my eyes are really wide or I'm gripping my weight really tight, I burn air. The water doesn't have anything against me. You have money, you're pretty, doesn't care.
Yeah.
So all it is neutral feedback. So on one trip, you could go there and almost come back. Maybe your limiting beliefs make you come up for air. And if we give you some cues and go, okay, can you relax? Can you calm down before you start? Can you be efficient? So efficient maybe even with your words, with your responses. Then you're allowed to get there and back without a breath. And so using the training, so it's not my opinion, because who wants another opinion, and saying, hey, I'm going to give you all the cues, you figure this out yourself, and the water's just a neutral environment, an objective environment that gives you real-time feedback. So there's ways to get people to tap into that so they notice. Because even sitting, right, if I'm sitting here and my jaw's clenched, I'm moving, into my sympathetic system. If I'm not breathing deep and soft into my belly, I'm moving out of, my parasympathetic. So using the training as feedback so that when you are sitting in a either personal situation or you're at work and something's happening, you go, oh, okay, I notice what's going on with me. So I really love that. And the breathing really is a helpful tool that people realize, hey, it's free, I can do it anywhere, and in 2 minutes I can downregulate without telling myself, hey, I gotta relax. I can just take a longer exhale than inhale, and pretty much I'm gonna downregulate. So we try our best so that you can be ballistic. I can do 400 jumps, I'm not gonna crush my joints, I can do performance training, but also simultaneously in an environment that talks to me honestly.
So, and breathing is such a big part of well-being that people don't realize. I mean, I came onto it. I had a session back in 2015 with Wim Hof, and I really kind of learned, we talked about this yesterday, but I really kind of learned how critical breathing really is and how to do it, because we don't even do it right.
No.
So you've incorporated breathing as a part of XPT. It's a part of the session. How are you incorporating it, and how, if someone is from the outside who wants to invest and learn more about it, how can they engage in that component of it?
So first I'll tell you how we do it. One is we have breathing sessions. So they, we'll take you up, take you down, and use different, use your mouth, use your nose, and get people to understand the relationship also with CO2. Right? Because a lot of times people think, I'm holding my breath. It's like, and a lot of top tier athletes have terrible, what they call BOLT scores. Patrick McKeown talks a lot about this, which is their ability to work more with less air. So their relationship with CO2. So a lot of times when we do breath work or holding your breath, people go, I'm out of air. It's like, no, your CO2's high and you're intolerant. So first it's doing that. Then if you go into the pool, for example, first thing you do, let's say I'm a footballer, meaning a soccer player. If I've run up and down the floor, the court, the field, and I have a few seconds, what's the first thing I can do to help myself? I can get rid of my CO2 so that then I can take in these big oxygenating breaths. So the pool teaches you that right away, because I can say, all right, you're gonna do 10 jumps, then you're gonna grab this weight and go there and back right away. Well, in between, you wanna get rid of your CO2, take that big soft breath, not, because that's only in the throat. It's, right, it's down in. So using that environment to go, oh wait, I can bring this into the office, a basketball court, as an athlete, whatever it is understanding first the relationship between oxygen and CO2. And so if people want to engage, if they're not going to do pool training, something like that, we do have an app. So XPT has an app, which is really helpful. But I think for us, that's the more interesting part, is sort of going back to some of the basics that we're missing and be like, I have this, my HRV. It's like, yeah, but you don't even breathe correctly. And I catch myself all the time, because I'm a grinder, of course. I'm going to just, muscle through it. Oh, when's the last time you took a really deep breath? And so just using those reminders, and you never get there. That's the whole thing. It's never perfect. You never get there. You're just going to show up each day and do your best. And you're going to keep an open mind, because that's the other thing is you don't want to be bouncing all over the place from first principles. There's some basics that are always going to be true, but it's still staying open to the fact that this is what I know today, and that might be different. I might get new information that's better, and don't be afraid to incorporate that.
Do you have a very basic ritual? Like, I'm just sitting here now thinking about my breathing and worrying about
deep.
and everything.
Because most people breathe up here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
And they do a vertical breath, right? They go, if you tell most people breathe deeply, they go, right? They don't go down here, especially women, because we're told to suck it in. Makes perfect sense. Here, plus we're sitting, so it's hard to get it down in through there, into the belly first. Then I always say the lower ribs, and then that big round horizontal breath opening in here.
Do you have any rituals in terms of the timing? Like, do you do anything in the morning or in the middle of the day if you've got a lot going on? Are there any things that you found have worked particularly well for you?
I just do a personal scan whenever I get a chance. So what does that mean? My kids are bigger now, but when they're little, it's like, yeah, right. Okay, at 12 o'clock, everyone, I'm going to sit down. It's like, yeah, right. Get out. You're going to be picking up toys and, trying to figure something out. So what I do is any moment, I'm alone in the car, I'm in the shower, I just do a quick scan and be like, hey, how am I doing? Like, oh, you've been wanting to kill everybody all day long. What's up?
Yeah.
Maybe take a deep breath. So I use that as a more realistic tool for me personally. Also in the morning, before I put my feet on the floor, because I wouldn't say I wake up like, yay, hit the day. So everyone's different. Laird gets up, boom, no problem. I sort of, review, who is it that I'm trying to be and show up in the world as? Okay, I remind myself of that. Then I put my feet on the floor so that hopefully I can back into that all the choices that would help me be this person that I say I'm hoping to be. So that would mean what I put in my mouth, how I speak to people, if I practice exercising or not, and use that as my North Star, because I don't find it naturally, but I need to remind myself, because I know that there's no other way for me. It's the only way that I can not only get it all done, but be in a nurturing and thriving relationship and try to be the best parent I can be, even though I blow that every day, and just keep working at it.
Something which comes to mind is so much of what you say is around mindfulness and about kind of finding your inner peace and really centering yourself, not being hyper reactive to something.
Right.
We talk a lot about using holistic practices, whether it's movement, walking, and things that we both do, and a lot of people here do. But at the same time, when you look at the country, anxiety is at record levels, but also anxiety drugs are at record levels too. And I wonder look, what is it going to take, and what is your opinion? Do you think that anxiety is high because obviously we have the devices, we're being hit on all the things, but then we're so easy to just say, take a pill. And even at schools, right, they're saying they need to get on this kind of medication because I can't deal with children. And that's seemingly so harmful. And how do you, look at what's happening in the country today? You're coming from such a holistic practice area, and what can we do to get this awareness out?
It's interesting. I have a guy, PJ Nestler, he's head of programming at XPT, and he gives this talk, and he talks about how your biology is set up to make you survive, not thrive. Period, end of story, full stop. So I don't know.
Okay.
Except my hope is that the younger group, you're going to see it both ways, right? You're going to see people who live in their virtual world because it's better than their real life, because they haven't built their real life. Mm-hmm. They don't even know how to talk to people, right? They can't do this eyeball to eyeball. Yeah. And then you're going to have a group, I think, as a reaction, as a rebellion, that's going to feel how that personal sovereignty is super important. Discernment. Well, what's going to work for me? And I think we're also going to have enough information out about, and we can say it till we're blue in the face, but it's a real thing. And I am not as susceptible to hearing it as much as Laird. EMFs, blue light, all of this is kicking our ass in a whole interesting way that you're going to have a group that goes, I get it. I'm going to put things in place, whatever, Faraday, this and that. I'm going to turn the router off at night. I'm going to, have these things in place. And then you're going to have a whole group, I think, that is going to disappear and merge into with technology. And, I don't want to fight it. I just want to be a part of being a resource. If there are people who go, is there any way, what are the things we can do? Because it's something I battle every day myself. Laird is up everyone's colon in my house constantly about, the blue light and this and that. And as long as people can also monetize through the medications and other, they're not going to be unhappy that people are unwell. And that's where the sovereignty part comes in, where it's like, well, wait a second. I'm not going to farm this out to you to tell me. And that's not to say also that there isn't a place, but I think it's a much smaller place for these medicines than how they're being used. So we're at that moment.
Yeah.
It's, like they say, it's all an experiment. And there's going to be a lot of people that are hurt and suffer in the experiment.
In the process.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. We love to wrap up with one question. We have been wrapping up with one question, rather.
Okay.
And again, given your expertise, I don't even know where this one's going to go.
I have no expertise.
Your experience.
Okay.
We are asking people, have you come across a new wellness, practice or hack that you thought has been meaningful to you in like the last, 12 months?
12 months.
Anything recent? Yeah.
I do. It's so boring. I'm going to be honest with you. It's
We like boring.
so boring. If you had said it on the hierarchical of things besides stress management, I would have said it's nutrition. If I was just like on the board going like, oh, nutrition, you can't exercise a bad diet away, whatever. Sunlight.
Interesting.
Second person said sunlight.
Being exposed to sunlight,
Yeah.
setting your circadian rhythm. First thing, your eyes, sunlight goes through your eyes, tells your brain, creates melatonin, hey, release this in about 14 hours. So it's not sexy because it's readily available. But I would say if I was being responsible, sunlight is something it's so funny, right? Like it was
You're
such
not the only person to say that.
well, we forever have worshipped the sun, and now it's other. And so I would say I would like to be part of going a little bit, not because our biology is not different yet. We haven't put the chip in the head yet.
Yeah.
It's only in our pocket. We have to honor that, and I think it's a good starting point.
And with that, just before we finish, how do you link that with sleep? Because I know part of your program you have a section on recovery. Like, is there anything that you've learned or found out also about sleep that's important to share? Because it's something that we talk about, and probably we both rely too much on technology to tell us whether we've had a good sleep or not. And I am going to give some thought to that, being more in touch with how I feel. But what is there any lessons that you've learned, particularly about sleep?
I think same time as much as you can every night. Listen, I had kids that didn't sleep. So if you have a new child, don't worry about it. You'll get back to sleeping. If you're a woman in menopause, get your hormones checked because you don't need to suffer through the night. But Laird always talks about being tired enough to sleep well. So that's where movement comes in. But also around the same time, and if you can back away 3 hours, I never get that done because I go to bed a lot earlier and my dinner is usually around 6:37. But if you can back away about 3 hours from your dinner to the best of your ability, around the same time you'll get in that rhythm. But that sunlight, the eye exposure to the sun does set the circadian rhythm, full stop. So I do think that is important. And then all the sleep hygiene. Okay, a dark room. Your skin senses light, so every little light in your room, to put a piece of black tape over it. And then for couples, one thing I've heard that's helpful is, sometimes people disrupt each other. Is the best thing, and not sleeping in sleep divorce in other rooms, is have your own blanket and sheets. So every time they roll over and you roll over, you're not impacting each other, but yet you're sharing that space together. Because I think there's a bonding that happens when we sleep together. So if you can avoid going into separate rooms. And make it, at the end of the day, the $1 million question for me is, why isn't it important? We've made everything else important. Why have we not made figuring out, or at least trying to figure out, these elements of our life that support our health important? And so really starting there, is this a value to you?
And it's so easy, simple, anyone can do it.
It is, but we're a biological entity living in a world that we're in conflict with. So it's actually not as easy. It was meant to be easy,
Right.
And it no longer is. It's a very complicated thing. And so it's sort of loving yourself enough to go, you know what, I'm going to figure this out a little better. Not perfect. That's never realistic, but I'm just going to I always say, just keep heading in that direction, right? Just keep heading towards eating better and moving and loving each other. Just keep heading that way, and I feel like you land on good places.
Where can we find out about your XPT?
We have xptlife.com, and if people want to try Laird Superfood, lairdsuperfood.com. I have a show, Gabby Reece Show, and that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for
again,
coming on.
yeah.
Thanks for having me.